Today we're going to talk about two important formulas in our study of algebra. The first one is the distance formula, the distance between 2 points. So imagine you have 2 points here, one at x1, y1, one at x2, y2. How do I find the distance between those 2 points using the coordinate plane, the xy coordinate plane? Well, consider constructing a right triangle here. If we construct a right triangle here, we can use Pythagorean theorem to find the distance between these 2 points, which is the hypotenuse of that right triangle. So remember, the Pythagorean theorem said that C, the distance, the hypotenuse length, is equal to the square root of a squared plus b squared. That's from Pythagoras. And C is the hypotenuse, A and B are the other legs. Well, the distance between these 2 points is a hypotenuse. What are the legs? What are the distance of the legs? Well, if we look at this, we're going to have a square root here. A squared, think of the horizontal distance here between x1 and x2. Think of A between x1 and x2. The distance between those two is x2 minus x1. So we'll have x2 minus x1 squared. That's the horizontal leg. And then the vertical leg of the right triangle is the difference in the y's. So think of this as b. Well, b is going to be equal to y2 minus y1. And we have to square that for the Pythagorean theorem. So the distance between 2 points x1, y1 and x2, y2 is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So let's take a couple of examples of using this formula. So here we want to find the distance between the point negative 2, 8 and 3, 4. So I've labeled them here x1, y1, x2, y2. So my distance is equal to, what it says here, you take the difference in x's, you square it, add it to the differences in y's squared. So I'm going to have the distance is equal to the square root, differences in x's, 3 minus 2 squared plus differences in y's, 4 minus 8 squared. So we calculate this out to get 5 squared, the square root of 5 squared plus negative 4 squared, which gives me the square root of 25 plus 16, which works out to be the square root of 41. So the distance between these 2 points is the square root of 41. Graphically, that's going to look like the square root of 41 is the distance between negative 2, 8 and 3, 4. So graphically, that's what it looks like. And the square root of 41 is 6.403 approximately. So that's what we're looking at, this distance between those 2 points. Let's take another example. So in part B, we want to find the distance between these 2 points, 2 root 3, root 6, and negative root 3, 5 root 6. So we take the difference in the x's and we square them, and we take the differences in the y's and we square them, add them up, square root. So in other words, we get 2 root 3 minus root 3 squared and plus root 6 minus 5 root 6 squared. Then we perform those operations in the middle. Here we have a 2 root 3, 2 times root 3 plus a root 3. That's going to give me 3 root 3 squared. Plus, here we have a 1 root 6 minus a 5 root 6. So 1 minus 5 is minus 4 root 6 squared. We're square rooting the whole thing, and then we square it. So 3 squared is 9, and root 3 squared is 3. So we have 9 times 3, all under the square root, plus negative 4 squared is 16, root 6 squared is 6. So what we have here is the square root of 9 times 3 plus 16 times 6, and we want to calculate that out to get the square root of 27 plus 96, which is the square root of 123. And there's our distance between those 2 points, which is about 11.09 if we actually square root 123. So the next formula we want to talk about is the midpoint formula between 2 points x1, y1 and x2, y2, the midpoint. Well, how do you find the middle of something? In this case, think of it as finding the average. I want the middle here, the middle between x1 and y1, x1 and x2 is going to be the average of x1 and x2. So my x-coordinate will be x1 plus x2 over 2, and my y-coordinate, similarly, my y coordinate, I want the middle between y1 and y2. Well, that's going to be the average of those two. So in other words, that's going to be y1 plus y2 over 2. And so I have the midpoint. Remember, it's a point, it's a coordinate point, the midpoint between these 2 points. So now let's use this formula to find the midpoint between 2 points. So find the midpoint between negative 1, 3 and 1, 4. Well, to find the midpoint, we just average the x's and average the y's. So my midpoint is going to be negative 1 plus 1 over 2. And the x, that's the x coordinate, and the y coordinate would be 3 plus 4 over 2. So negative 1 plus 1 is 0 over 2. 0 over 2 is just 0. And 3 plus 4 is 7. 7 over 2 is 7 halves, or 3 1/2. And there's my midpoint.